Three.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanner,
I'm Brenna.
Hi, Natasha.
and today we are going to be doing our mock scene outdoor crime scene report and presentation. So starting off, we want to give you some background information about the case. So the case number that was assigned to us was 2025-007-204. Upon arrival, we were given case information of the victim, who was David Rossi. The suspect was Alex Blake. Our first responding officer that was at the scene was Jessica Williams, and then witnesses that we had at the scene was Leah Webb and Scott Rex. And so starting off, we had a argument that started off between the victim and suspect. The argument got heated and a fight ensued between the victim and suspect. The suspect fled from the scene, and medical professionals rushed to the victim to the hospital in order to treat his injuries. The hospital pronounced the victim dead upon arrival. This was the case information that we were given before we started processing our scene. So upon getting this information, we quickly took notes before we started to directly process our scene and gather our evidence.
So next is going to be our agenda. This is everything we're going to talk about throughout our presentation. We're going to start off with our evidence identified. We're going to move towards photography, sketching with our rough and final sketch. Some scene processing techniques that we used and just in general. We're going to have a main theory, alternate theory, and then the weather conditions.
Okay, now we're going to talk about all the evidence that we identified. Okay, so first we found a tool mark plank. It was a plank of wood that was found with 6 tool mark impressions. This is considered impression evidence as it left a depth and a molded shape onto its wooden surface. The wood was leaning against the base of the pillar in the southwest corner. There were some gray and blue smudges included as well. There were no striations, which helped us create a theory that the victim was defending himself from a suspect using the wooden plank while the suspect was charging, creating force between the surface of the wooden plank and weapon of choice, which was most likely the screwdriver. That will be further explained in the slideshow.
Okay, so next we're going to move on to the Nike shoe. It was an example of physical evidence. It was found on the east side near the concrete wall. So there were some wear and tear marks on the sole was coming off, or the sole was coming off the bottom. There's also some different like patterns on the shoe, as well as the orange/yellow Nike sign on the right of the shoe. We concluded that it was a right shoe, men's size 9 after further investigation. Dirt and mud was caked on the front of the shoe. And then our theory overall with the shoe was that it fell off the suspect as he was quickly fleeing the scene.
And then our next piece of evidence was our purple fabric, which was our physical evidence. This was found on the northwest corner of the scene. As you can tell, it was in the rocks and it had debris, and so it was very hard to spot and see. As you could see from the close-up, there was other debris around it, such as leaves, dirt, dust, etc. There was no brand identified on the fabric, as well as the fabric had like a rugged and matte texture to it. But we believe, and how it relates to our overall theory, is that it was caused by the victim grabbing the suspect's shirt while they were fighting.
And then we have a piece of hair. It was light blonde hair found at the southeast corner of the scene near the end of the staircase. It was a pretty good sized piece of hair, so the root may be included to give us nuclear DNA after further testing to clarify. If a follicle is found, it can help with individual identification because it gives nuclear DNA. If only a shaft is available, it will give us only mitochondrial DNA. Which will give you the race and maternal lineage, but can't help identify a singular individual. This piece of hair might have came from the suspect or victim during their fight.
So next, we're going to look at some paint chips. They were another example of physical evidence. They were found in the southeast corner of the scene. As you can tell from the photo, they were turquoise. There was two small length paint chips. Um, you can do fracture matching to determine if the potential two paint chips came from the same source. As well as you can kind of individualize because of the ragged and broken edges on the two sides. Our theory overall for the paint chips was going to be they may have fallen from either the suspect or the victim's head during the fight, which led them to land in between the rocks.
And then our next piece of evidence was a Jolly Rancher wrapper. With this was a physical piece of evidence, but it was found in the southeast corner of the scene. It was a right wrapper that had yellow twisted ends, and as you can see in the picture, there was like leaves and other debris that were also inside the wrapper. Um, the wrapper may have been, our theory is that the wrapper may have been, the Jolly Rancher itself may have been consumed by the victim or suspect. And on the wrapper, there may be potentially a fingerprint or DNA, which can be used to later either support or disprove our theory and show us if there is another individual that was there. But there will be further testing that will need to be done on this wrapper in order to determine if there is any saliva, sweat, or fingerprints directly found on this wrapper.
And then we have a screwdriver. A black screwdriver was found standing straight up. The tool part was pierced inside the dirt in between rocks at the southeast corner of the scene. The top and rim of the handle has some marks and white smudges on it. The tool should be collected and sent to the lab for tool mark impression comparison techniques, as this tool may have been used during the fight with the wooden plank. We theorized that the tool was used and fell in between the rocks during the fight. Microcell is a good technique to use, but will be explained further in the slideshow. You never want to put the tool in the tool mark for comparison, as it might alter the impression.
And then this is going to be the shoe impression, which is going to be our evidence impression, impression evidence, sorry. And so specifically with this, the shoe that was in the soil, we had soil that was wet because it had rained the previous night beforehand. And so this provided a good opportunity for making 3D impressions. So specifically within our scene, the shoe print was found in the southeast corner of the scene near the red sidewalk. Within it, upon examining, we made notes that it had a hexagon shape upon impression as like the shoe pattern on the bottom, as well as there were zigzag patterns that were in the print and the impression as well. And so our theories that may have came either from the victim's shoe or the suspect's shoe during the struggle and during the argument that they had had.
So next, we're going to look at the green warning sticker, another example of physical evidence. It was a green warning label stating that there was no parking zone, and then the sticker was covered in dirt and rocks on the sticky end. It was near the east wall. As you can tell through the images, there's like a little tow truck, and then you're going to have the lettering in black, and then the no parking sticker on the right of that sticker. Our theory that we concluded was that it may have been on the suspect's vehicle and they could have come off as they were fleeing the scene.
Next, we have a plastic wrapper. This was found in the southeast corner of the scene next to one of the pillars. Ink faded on the plastic wrapper. It's super crumpled, small, dusty, looks pretty old. But it looks, our theory that we have put is that it may have fallen from the pocket of a suspect or victim during the fight. This was hard to identify with a naked eye because it was so small. This was more located on more of the pebbly rocks than more of the boulder rocks in the middle of the crime scene. Photography. So these are the pictures of all four corners of our crime scene. You can see that it was very rocky and muddy terrain, fully shaded. The bigger rocks were more in the middle, and the more pebbly rocks were on the perimeter and on the south wall perimeter. This was before it all got submerged in water. These are pictures of our trace evidence. On the left side, it was a light in-depth shoe print. On the left, on the right is a little piece of hair, blonde.
And so next is we're going to talk about our sketches. So specifically, this was our rough sketch. The measurement method that we decided to use was rectangular coordinates. With the rough sketch, as we all know, it is not drawn to scale. With specifically our rectangular coordinates, we measured from the south end as well as the east wall to get our coordinates directly for our items once our items were fixed. An alternative method that we could have used during with our rough sketch and with measuring our items is transecting baseline, where we create a data endpoint. And then from there, our data endpoint is laying across, like our tape measure is laid evenly across the scene. And then from there, we measure each item from the tape measure, and then also note direction. And so this was our rough sketch that we created before we created our final sketch. And so for the final sketch, again, just going off of final sketch, it is a lot simpler. We included how it was mapped and the techniques that were used for specifically our final sketch. Since it is drawn to scale, we included our scale, which was 1 inch equals 2.5 feet.
So next we're going to go into some of the techniques that we could have used in this as well. So our first one was plaster of Paris. It's a technique used to create a cast for 3D impressions. Gel lifter would have been used with a 2D impression on a flat surface, as well as the electrostatic dust um, as well. It's going to be poured on a baffle at a low angle, collected with the soil on the bottom, and helps with analyzing and examining the pattern of the impression. This is the one that we used for our shoe print because it was a 3D impression in dirt. We used paper as our baffle just so that the mix would not go through, causing pressure on the impression and messing it up. We laid it flat and then we went through with another layer so that it was evenly centered. And then we waited an hour before collection.
Okay, and then microsolid hardener. This technique would have been used on the wooden plank with the tool marks. To create a cast for tool mark evidence, a mixture of microsol and a hardener is prepared on you can mix it on a mixing plate with the wooden or popsicle stick. Once the mixture's set and hardens in the tool mark, it can be peeled off and it forms a detailed impression of the tool mark, capturing fine and valuable characteristics. The casting technique is valuable in crime scene processing because it does preserve the unique microscopic features left by a tool on surface. These features can be compared under a microscope in a lab to a suspected tool to determine if it was used in the commission of a crime, making it a critical method for forensic comparison and analysis.
And then the last technique that we could have used was fracture matching, and it's a technique used to analyze glass, paint chips, or tape. It is basically inspecting a torn edge or broken edge, torn or broken edge of a piece of evidence to determine the item's source. It's used to see if two items came from the same source or if they are two different items. And so when examining, you want to start with the outer edges. If the outer edges match, you want to start to examine the inner edges. As the outer if the outer edges do match, it does indicate that it may have come from the same class, and then further analysis is needed in order to determine if the individual characteristics match, and that can be determined if the inside edges also match to the other pieces, which can be used to conclusively identify that the two pieces did come from the same source. And so these are going to be our theories that we went through. And that we came up about what may have happened during our scene and the sequence of events that may have taken place. So starting off, the suspect, Alex Baker, is a painter who was commissioned by the victim, David Rossi, to paint a mural in the Building 57 for the Forensic Society Club. Alex was taking a break and enjoying a Jolly Rancher before having David approach him. Alex confronted David before he started to paint the wall, and the two of them got into a large argument about the overall design of the mural. David pushed Alex, which made him stumble backwards, causing the screwdriver to fall out of his pocket. Upon falling, paint chips that were on Alex's pants fell into the rocks as well. In a fit of rage, Alex quickly got up and forcefully grabbed David's purple shirt. David turned and pulled away, potentially causing his shirt to rip. And then David turned toward the concrete wall where his back hit the wall. And once his back hit the wall, he took a step back, which caused some hair to fall out of his head, as well as a shoe impression in the mud. Alex then took the screwdriver tool himself and tried to hit David with it, but David grabbed a plank of wood to defend himself, which could have caused the tool marks in the plank of wood. And then Alex tripped over the rocks, which caused his shoe to fall off. And then after his shoe fell off, he hit and injured David before fleeing from the scene in his car. And then the parking violation sticker fell off his car and went into our scene, is what we think happened when he tried to flee the scene. And this was an assault turned homicide.
So secondary, our alternative theory was self-defense. So Alex Blake, a painter commissioned to create a mural near Building 57 for the Forensic Science Club, was finishing his lunch break when David Rosie, the client, arrived to review the mural's progress. Alex was finishing up eating a Jolly Rancher when David appeared. David appeared irritated, claiming Alex had ignored several of his design requests. The conversation quickly turned into a heated argument. As tensions rose, David became physically aggressive, shoving Alex in the chest. Alex stumbled backward, dropping the screwdriver, which he had been using to open paint cans. Some paint chips from his pants fell into the gravel and rocks nearby as he tried to regain his balance. David continued to advance towards Alex, yelling and pointing. Fearing another shove, Alex raised his hands defensively and accidentally grabbed David's shirt, causing a tear in the fabric. David tried to pull away, losing balance and striking his back against the concrete wall, dislodging a few hairs and leaving a shoe print in the mud below. Feeling cornered, Alex picked up the screwdriver from the ground as David reached for a wooden plank from the worksite. During the brief struggle, the plank struck the screwdriver, creating tool marks. In the chaos, Alex tripped over the rocks, losing one of his shoes, and fell toward David. The impact caused David's injury, but there was no deliberate intent to harm. Panicked and fearful that the situation would appear as an assault, Alex fled the scene, leaving behind his shoe, screwdriver, and paint traces. As Alex was fleeing in his car, a parking sticker violation flew off and fell to the ground. He did also leave the victim as well, with the victim having to be rushed to the hospital and then ultimately passing away.
And then we also wanted to talk about the weather, as the weather played a huge part in this scene. So as you can see the photos, our scene flooded at around 1:45 p.m. There's excessive amount of wind and rain. And how we proceeded and went about dealing with this challenge was we first decided to do a debriefing in which our team met and we made it a priority to collect all of our trace evidence. So we went out of order with things and we paused our rough sketch and we immediately started collecting the hair, the paint chips, the impression evidence because we wanted to make sure that none of our evidence got contaminated or got lost from the weather. And then from there, after we've collected our trace evidence, was when it started to pour. Rain started coming down. And because our scene was located near a drain, the drain started emptying water into our scene. And so our scene filled with about 3 inches of water. And so we were doing our very best to collect as many items as evidence as possible. However, what we learned and what we took away from this experience was that there are several challenges that may arise at a crime scene, and that no crime scene is going to be processed the same way as another one. But it's not how the challenges affect you, but rather how you can overcome and adapt to those challenges, instead of letting it discourage you and preventing you from being able to do your job and collect all the necessary evidence. So through this, we learned that we still had to keep growing the evidence. We still had to package everything. It showed us that weather could not stop us. And it kind of showed us that any challenge and any issues may occur at an actual crime scene, which is why it's important to not stay focused, stay calm, and just to continue collecting as much as possible and documenting the scene itself, which is why it's so important to not only take notes, but also take pictures, but also sketch the scene in order to show the relationships of all of our items of evidence. Thank you so much for watching our presentation. If you guys have any additional questions, you are more than welcome to ask any one of us, and we would be more than happy to answer any further questions you may have about any of the techniques that we use or any of our pieces of items of evidence. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this.